Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. There's students all throughout the world who are studying this book series called Buddha Vajana, which stands for the words of the Buddha. And in this book series, there's 13 books that have the words of the Buddha translated from the Pali Canon, the original source of Gotama Buddha's teachings, into the English language. And as students are reading these throughout the world and spending time to investigate each chapter of the book, then we get together on Saturdays in order to discuss those in terms of any questions that the students have. Right now, I'm just having the students actually read the book and ask questions. In the future, in about another 3 months or so, when we restart this program, we'll actually be spending more time where I'll actually be teaching what's in these teachings. But for now, the way that I'm doing it is just allowing the students to ask any questions based on their study, almost like a PhD program, where students are actively learning on their own and they're just coming to me for guidance. There's another program that I teach on Sunday and Wednesday where we use a different text as our source text, which is this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Nibbana. And in this book, each Sunday, I take a chapter from the book and we actually study it, and I give a talk on that particular chapter. And then on Wednesday, we spend time doing breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, or chanting. And that's a great program for anybody who needs to build up a foundation of their Buddhist practice in order to understand what the Buddha taught and really get started with learning about meditation, implementing a meditation program, developing that practice, understanding the Eightfold Path, how to practice that in daily life, and how to build up your practice of the Buddhist teachings. This program of the words of the Buddha, Pali Canon and English Study Group, this is for people who've already studied that program about 6 months to a year, or maybe doing them side by side together at the same time. Because if you were just to study this Pali Canon and English Study Group program, then it's a bunch of different teachings from all throughout the Buddhist text of the Pali Canon, and they're not necessarily organized in a beginning, middle, and end. Where the group learning program on Sunday and Wednesday, there's a beginning, middle, and end, where it's really progressing you in your practice and building up this nice framework for you. So but by the time students move into this program, then you're just really deepening your understanding of what the Buddha taught and kind of filling in some different pieces to understand how all of these teachings fit together on this path to enlightenment, where the mind can be trained to eliminate discontent feelings. The mind can be trained to eliminate anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, sadness, stress, anxiety. It can eliminate boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of these discontent feelings and others can be eliminated from the mind as the mind learns these teachings and progresses in its training and progresses in its practice, where it gets closer and closer to this enlightened mental state where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. An enlightened mind never experiences any more discontent feelings whatsoever. So it will never feel sad ever again. It will never get angry ever again. It will never get bored or lonely ever again. That's the benefit of all this work, to learn and practice these teachings, put them into your daily life as a life practice, is the benefits are that the mind becomes more and more peaceful, more and more calm, more and more joy. So it all starts with your dedication, your determination, your diligence to actually learn and practice. So I make all that available for you guys through books and online classes and audiobooks, podcasts, videos, an online group, personal guidance, and all these different things. Today, the way that we start this class is we start with meditation. So each Saturday when we get together, we always start with doing meditation as a group. This really helps to prepare the mind for learning the teachings. It helps to kind of clear any clutter that's in the mind and helps you to then focus on the task of learning and growing, because it's going to build your concentration and also gives us a chance to come together and support and encourage each other in our meditation practice. So if you're here for the first time, you're welcome to join us for meditation, and you're welcome to stick around even if you haven't read this book yet, because we're going to be displaying this on the screen and you'll get to learn right along with the other students as they ask questions. And one of our moderators can perhaps share the link for you guys in Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom, where you can actually download these books for free, which is essentially in our Daily Wisdom Walking the Path with the Buddha Facebook group under the Files section. If you go there, you'll start seeing the books being posted there. 9 of them are posted already, with another 4 to come, or actually another 3 to come by the time we get to the end of this program. And then we'll eventually be restarting this program all over again with new text and updated translations and things like that. So welcome. I'm really glad you're here to learn and practice the Buddha's teachings. Let's get started with some meditation, where I'll just give some brief guidance, because this group tends to be meditators who already are developing their practice or already have developed their practice, and just need a little bit of guidance just for those of you guys that are maybe coming in for the first time. So go ahead and pull up a meditation cushion, or if you're in a chair, get your lower body nice and comfortable. You can take either the seated, lying, or standing position here. Just make the lower body comfortable. The upper body should be nice and erect. This helps to keep the mind attentive and alert, whereas if I was slouched, the mind would have a tendency to turn off, or if I was too rigid, the mind would be too uptight and too tense. So we want to find that middle where the body is erect, but it's not too tight and it's not too loose. Then you would like to place your hands and arms where perhaps your right hand's over your left and your thumbs together, or the palms are on your thighs or on your knees or on the armrest of your chair, whatever's comfortable for you. There's not just one fixed, permanent position for everyone to meditate in, because everybody's body is a little bit different. But you'd like to get to the point where just your upper body is engaged and everything else is completely loose and comfortable, but not luxurious. Then close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Just develop a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. The pace of your breath doesn't need to match to the guidance that I'm providing. These are just cues just to help you remember to breathe in and out. I'm going to do some chanting just to help us ease into meditation. Anyone who knows these chants, you're welcome to follow along and chant together. And then I'll be back with some more guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Apivateyami Savakhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato พุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, your eyes should be closed. Should be breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Focusing the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Just have a nice natural breath. Anytime the mind leaves from the breath, either to the past or the future, any thoughts, ideas, or perceptions enter the mind, just cut that off and let it go. Don't try to judge the thoughts. Don't try to label them or figure out where they're coming from. Just wherever you notice it, just cut it off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath. Moving in and out. Breathing in and out. Here we're building mindfulness or awareness of mind. And as the mind becomes aware of anything that distracts the mind off the breath, then we're cutting it off and letting it go, eliminating craving, desire, attachment, focusing the mind back to the breath. Breathing in and out. Craving, desire, attachment causes discontentedness. So that's why we're eliminating it through this practice. Training the mind to let go. The mind may even be interested to hold on to this voice. So I'm going to be quiet now, just to let you focus on the breath. Breathing in and out.
ตังมหากวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหากวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมพุทโธสัคขะโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรภูริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโหโตภะคะวะติ
Alright, if you guys would like to slowly start coming out of meditation, we can all get together for our class here. We've got moderators Manal and Basam who are logged into Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom looking at any questions that you guys might submit regarding this book, Dhamma Primer. Dhamma meaning teachings and primer meaning kind of like to get you started, so to speak. Even though this is version or volume 9, it really has a really nice foundation of many of the teachings from the Buddha. And the book series that I'm putting together, this is going to be volume 3, and I'm calling it Foundations in the Teachings, because that's essentially what this book is. And whenever I go on a trip, I always grab, or not always, but I will typically grab this book because it just has such a nice collection of different teachings to read on the plane or at the beach or wherever I might be going. Not that I necessarily go anywhere these days, but when I used to travel around teaching in different parts of Thailand, when I'm on the plane or I'm waiting in an airport or waiting for a class, this is the book that I will pick up and actually read, because there's just such a nice smattering of teachings here. So it's really nice that we finally have arrived to this particular book, because what you guys are going to find is just a really nice collection and different selection of teachings throughout the entire book. And you've got the printed book, many of you out there that are studying this, but also you have the PDF version in our Facebook group that I mentioned, Buddha, in the Daily Wisdom Facebook group, Walking the Path with the Buddha. If you go to the file section, I've updated these translations to add revised language that I think will help you a lot as you progress. And some of the teachings that you're going to find in this book, we've already actually studied in other books that we've already studied. So there might be some that you actually study and you're like, oh yeah, we've already discussed that one, or we've already studied that one. So that's why in this book, we're going through it in 4 weeks, but there's some places where we're actually covering 30 or 40 chapters in a given week because these chapters read really fast. As you guys know, it's like 45 minutes to an hour to read about 25 or 30 chapters, but also because you've seen some of these already in the past in other books that we've studied. So I would like to welcome all of your questions, whether you'd like to post those in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Manal and Bassam will see those and get them asked. And if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any question or follow-up questions that you have directly. And I will have the actual book here displayed on the screen for us so that as you guys are asking your questions, I'll be able to go directly to that chapter and we can all kind of view it together. So I'll turn this over to all of you, specifically Manal and Bassam, and then anybody who would like to ask any questions.
Yes, Teacher David, there are no questions on Zoom at the moment that I see. However, if we can maybe begin at chapter 2, the chance that one obtains the human state.
Sure.
Maybe if we can, if you're able to speak on how it is truly a chance and an opportunity for us to be born a human in this life.
Absolutely.
And I know that there's been countless births that we've experienced, countless births that we've experienced in the past, and some of which may have also been in the human state. So my question is more, I wanted to understand how is it that we haven't attained enlightenment? How is it that we regress so easily? And is regression something that's common? If a person has not attained enlightenment in this life as a human state, and reborn in another life, in another form, and that has happened numerous times over without achieving enlightenment in the human state, why is it that in the enlightenment state in the human state there is regression?
Okay, so I'll share a bunch of teachings along those lines, and then if there's something that I haven't answered in your question, Manal, I'll be sure to ask a follow-up. Or if there's any follow-ups to what I'm sharing, feel free to follow up, because the way that I see all the classes that I teach, whether it's online or at a temple, is this is a discussion, and that's really how you learn these teachings, is through discussion and investigating. So feel free to ask any follow-up questions, you or anyone else that's participating in the class, whatever venue, whether Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. So let's start with just a brief understanding of what exists in terms of the 5 realms in this rebirth. There's 5 realms that exist. There's the hell realm, there's the afflicted spirits realm, there's the animal realm, there's the human realm, and there's the heavenly realm. The way that the Buddha taught these is he taught it as hell, animal, afflicted spirits, human, and heavenly. And based on my experience, I've flipped these 2. But you'll see in his teachings that he teaches it as hell, animal, afflicted spirits, human, and heavenly realm. But I teach it as hell, afflicted spirits, animal, human, and heavenly realm. We are essentially being reborn throughout these various realms based on the natural law of Dhamma, based on the things that we're doing, either wholesome or unwholesome. We are going to be reborn into these various realms as different beings. There's 3 formless realms. Formless realms are realms where there is no physical form. That's hell, afflicted spirits, and heavenly realm. There is no actual physical form, so we call those the formless realms. Then there's the animal and human realm, which we call the form realms because there's physical form. But in all of these realms, there's a consciousness or a mind. There's awareness of mind. And this is where we have these various existences throughout these different realms, but they're all completely unique existences. We call it the cycle of rebirth, but there's actually nothing that's actually being reborn. So, a better way to describe it is actually the cycle of new existence. Because each time that you end up in a different realm, there's a new existence each time. And there's a new form or formless being, and there's a new consciousness. What does actually move from existence to existence is craving. If there's any craving, desire, attachment at the end of your life, then that's going to move forward into the new consciousness. And residual memories will move forward into a new existence. So if you think of existence A as a cardboard box and existence B as another cardboard box, they're completely unique cardboard boxes, different size, different shape, different texture, but these cardboard boxes are like the mind. At the end of existence A, if there's still craving, desire, attachment, that mental longing with a strong eagerness, that's the fuel that causes rebirth. So if there's craving, desire, attachment at the end of that life, then that craving and residual memories is going to move on to a new existence being deposited in this new cardboard box. But the shape of that cardboard box, the condition of that cardboard box, what's experienced with that cardboard box is all based on the Dhamma of your previous life. So based on what happened in existence A, it's going to determine the nature of our cardboard box. So bringing that more into what we understand in terms of talking about the human realm. Let's say there's two human existences, existence A and existence B. Existence A, we go through human life, and let's just say we're reborn because we haven't attained enlightenment. We're reborn into existence B. The condition of the human body is going to be based on the previous life. So when we experience our physical form, our body in our mom's stomach with the egg and the sperm coming together, that's what we call old Dhamma. That those genes that are passed down, the shape of our body, our muscles, and if we have sickness, bodily sickness, or we have good health, or poor eyesight, or blindness, or deafness, all of these things, they're based on the previous life. Because the mind hasn't actually come into that physical form yet to actually start making decisions. So this is what we call old Dhamma. Then once the consciousness or the mind has come into the mom's womb, now it's a new being. And any Dhamma that is experienced is new Dhamma. So that's old Dhamma and new Dhamma. And then the condition of our physical body, but also the type of family, the type of resources, the type of environment, the country, all these different things that we have access to in that new life is going to be based on our previous life. But once we're in this new life, now we start creating new Dhamma based on wholesome decisions and unwholesome decisions that we make from the time that we're in the womb. We're making decisions in there. Do we kick our mom? Do we not kick our mom? Of course, as a baby, an embryo inside the stomach, we have very little decision-making ability in terms of being truly aware of what we're doing. But there's awareness there. There's a consciousness there. And then when we come out, there's a consciousness, and we start making decisions, either wholesome or unwholesome. And we are growing up. And as we grow up, we make wholesome and unwholesome decisions. And that is what determines the condition of the mind in the condition of our life. If we're doing things like murdering or stealing or having sexual misconduct, lying, or taking substances that cause heedlessness, this is going to result in unwholesome outcomes for us because those are unwholesome decisions that we make. And there's other teachings on the Buddhist path in terms of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration that we are largely unaware of until we actually learn and practice these teachings. But this natural law of Dhamma that's always there, it doesn't matter if you're aware of it or not. The natural law of Dhamma is always affecting us. So even though we might not be aware of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, for example, as part of right speech, when we go through life at 10 and 15 years old and 20 and 30 years old, when we're speaking and we're not using those 5 factors because we're totally unaware of them because we've never studied or learned the Buddhist path, we're still being affected by that Dhamma. We're still being affected by the unwholesome decisions that we are unaware. We have ignorance or unknowing of true reality, that we don't know what we don't know. And therefore, we're still being affected by any decisions that we make. As we learn and practice these teachings, and we can improve our wisdom, our moral conduct, and our mental discipline, now because we're deeply becoming aware of this natural law of Dhamma, we can start making wiser and wiser choices about our moral conduct and about our mental discipline, and improve the outcomes of what we experience in this life, because now we have more wisdom. Previous to learning this path, we didn't have the wisdom that we needed. We were just wandering and roaming around the world, being angry, being frustrated, being sad, being lonely, feeling guilty, shameful, being shy, resentful, jealous. And as we roam around, we're making all these decisions based on this pollution of the mind, and we're just experiencing struggle after struggle after struggle, and we're being constantly reborn because of our lack of wisdom or our ignorance or unknowing of true reality. And it's because we don't have deep wisdom in this natural law of Dhamma that we continue to experience struggles and difficulties in each individual existence. And it's because of our unknowing of true reality, our lack of wisdom, our ignorance, that we keep being reborn over and over and over again, because we don't know what we don't know. And we think, a lot of us, that we just have one life, and we just try to live whatever life we live, and we don't really know what the real goal of this life is, and we just wonder and we roam and we look around and we do things, and we really don't have any real purpose in our life of what we're actually trying to accomplish in terms of getting out of all this misery and difficulty. And it's not until we learn and practice and see the truth for ourselves that, as we learn these teachings and we train the mind, that the condition of the mind gradually improves, and we get to this enlightened mental state where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently, no longer experiencing any discontentedness. But all the way up until that point, the mind is experiencing all kinds of discontentedness. And you can regress in the mind even as you're learning about these teachings, even when you're in the preliminary phases of what we call the jhanas, you can still regress from that point. It's not until we get to the first stage of enlightenment that the mind won't regress from there. Because in the first stage of enlightenment, a being has eliminated personal existence view, meaning they understand non-self and they've realized non-self. They've eliminated the self from the mind, no longer having an interest to project this self-image or self-identity, no longer being selfish, no longer pursuing selfish desires, that we've eliminated the self. The second fetter that we've eliminated is we've eliminated doubt about the teachings, or doubt that we are 100% confident that these teachings are progressing us along this path, and these are the teachings in the path that's going to lead us to enlightenment, because we've already experienced a whole lot of progress, that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness has significantly diminished. So you have no doubt that these are the teachings that lead to enlightenment. You don't know all the teachings in the first stage of enlightenment, and you're not practicing all the teachings in the first stage of enlightenment, but you have no doubt that you've seen enough progress on this path that these are the teachings that are going to lead to enlightenment. And you've eliminated the other fetter, the third one, which is wrong grasp of behavior and observances, which is all about rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. You know that those things don't lead to enlightenment. So once you get to that stage where you've put together enough of the Eightfold Path and enough of the meditation and all the other teachings, that you've progressed through those preliminary phases of the jhanas, experiencing quite a bit of unification of the mind, awareness of the mind, you've diminished your discontentedness quite significantly, and you've removed these three fetters, at that point there will be no regression of the mind in this life. And if you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you will be reborn back into the human realm, and no more than 7 more rebirths. And at that point, the Buddha calls that once you've attained the first stage of enlightenment, the mind is slanting, sloping, and inclining towards enlightenment. Meaning, essentially, you're going to slide up to enlightenment because you have no doubt that you're on the right path, and you're going to be determined and diligent and dedicated to progress on this path. So that's kind of this part of it in a nutshell, to kind of help you understand a bit about the cycle of rebirth and this progression along this path. But the mind can regress because it doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It may have doubt. While you're not experiencing the jhanas and you're just starting to put your practice together, you can experience doubt. The self can get in the way, the ego can get in the way, you can get diverted because of life experiences like children, perhaps. You get busy with them. Not that that's a bad thing, but we can just get busy with our children and be so absorbed in that we don't focus on our own priorities. We can get so absorbed in our career that we don't give our own practice a priority. We can get so absorbed in sensual desires like sexual contact and alcohol and drugs and pleasing the senses, looking for those pleasant feelings. That's the big one that really draws a lot of people away from the enlightened mental state, because they're unwilling to give up this temporary conditioned happiness in order to get to this unconditioned permanent joy. So you've got to be willing to let go of that temporary happiness based on these external conditions in order to get to this inner fulfillment, this inner peacefulness, this permanent joy, where the mind no longer has craving, desire, attachment, no longer has anger, hatred, ill will, and no longer has ignorance, delusion, or unknowing of true reality. And all the way up until you get to that first stage of enlightenment, there's lots of distractions along the way, particularly in the household life, because we have houses and cars and jobs and friends and family and children and all these different pursuits that we're into. So oftentimes what people end up encountering is they kind of bring their life down to being what the Buddha called secluded. Whereas if you're at a position in your life where you really don't have many friends, maybe there's only like 1 or 2 people that you really get along with, and you really just focus on your career and your family and like maybe 1 or 2 friends or no friends at all, this is kind of normal for someone who's headed towards enlightenment, because they start recognizing that this outside world doesn't really have anything satisfying, that there's just all this misery and discontentedness and heartache and harshness in the world. And a person who's on their way to enlightenment will oftentimes really become very secluded, and then they'll really focus on their own practice for several years, and then as the mind becomes more awakened and more enlightened, they will kind of step out into the world, now no longer being affected by the misery and discontentedness and the despair and all the problems in the world, where what kind of drove them into that seclusion is recognizing that there's all these problems in the world and there's really nothing you can do about it, because all these problems don't concern you, they're with other people. And what the real problem that you're trying to solve is your own discontent mind on this path to enlightenment. And the real problem that you're trying to solve there with the discontentedness is this cycle of rebirth, is getting out of this whole cycle of rebirth. So by eliminating discontentedness and attaining enlightenment, you get to live and experience the rest of your life with this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy, but then also you escape this whole cycle of rebirth. One of the ways you can think about these different existences is you can think of them like individual candles. Say there's like a gazillion candles lined up, and the first candle was lit millions of years ago, and it burned down and burned down and burned down to the bottom of that candle or somewhere midstream, And that existence as a snake, there was death, but there was still craving in the mind. So that was the fuel or the spark that lit the next candle. And now that candle burns down, and there was still craving, there was still anger, there was still ignorance in the mind, a knowing of true reality, the mind's lacking wisdom. So because of that craving, that was the spark that then lit the next candle. And all of these candles have just been burning and burning and burning and burning and burning until eventually you create enough wholesome results and you've developed the consciousness enough that you eventually end up in a human birth. And the human birth is the most ideal place to attain enlightenment, because in the human existence we experience all three feelings of painful feelings, pleasant feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. And we have the ability to cultivate our consciousness. In hell, they experience exclusively painful feelings, and they have no ability to develop their consciousness to enlightenment because they're just always in agony and pain. In afflicted spirits realm, there's so much craving there, and once again, they can't attain enlightenment because of their extensive craving. In the animal realm, they're experiencing painful feelings, pleasant feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant as well. But an animal can't cultivate their consciousness in the same way that a human can. They can't go off and meditate and train their mind to have loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity. They can't train in right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. They can't develop their wisdom to the point where they evolve their consciousness to enlightenment. And then in the heavenly realm, those beings are experiencing exclusively pleasant feelings, and they can cultivate their consciousness. They have the ability to do so, but they oftentimes lack the motivation because they're experiencing exclusively pleasant feelings. They're not experiencing painful feelings or feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. So heavenly beings will oftentimes be reborn back into another realm. It's not an ideal place to exist, and they're still in the cycle of rebirth. But some beings do attain enlightenment from the heavenly realm. It's only in this unique existence as a human being that we experience all three feelings, painful, pleasant, neither painful nor pleasant, and we have the ability to cultivate our consciousness. What this particular Dhamma teaching is talking about is this rare existence as a human being. And as Manal said, you may have been a human being in the past, but at this point it really doesn't matter. The fact is that you're human now and you can attain enlightenment. And the Buddha talks here about how rare it truly is to attain enlightenment, or to attain this human state. He talks about if the entire earth is flooded by water, and he took a yoke, which is essentially a circle, and tossed it on this water, and the water, this yoke is blown around on the flooded earth. The entire surface of the earth is flooded, and this small yoke is blowing around all throughout the water. And there's a sea turtle on the bottom of the floor of the sea, and it comes up once every 100 years for a breath of air, and then it goes back down. So on the surface of this entire flooded earth, with this circle being shifted around by the wind everywhere on the surface of the earth, every 100 years that turtle comes up, what's the chance of that turtle putting its head into that circle or that yoke? It's extremely rare. Even if it was in a bathtub and coming up once every 100 years, that would be extremely rare. Or a swimming pool. But here the entire earth is flooded, and the Buddha says, how rare is that the turtle would put its head into this yoke? It's extremely rare. That's how rare it is to obtain this human state. Then he goes on and he talks about to his students about not only is it extremely rare that you attain this human state, but it's also extremely rare that a Buddha would be awakened during your lifetime. So not only do you have this amazing human birth, but you're living in the time of a Buddha, an actual real live Buddha, which is the absolute best time to attain enlightenment, because a Buddha is going to have deep, profound wisdom of how to attain enlightenment, because they did it through an independent journey on their own. So their wisdom is really deep, very profound. They understand the path inside and out, backwards and forwards. Their mind is perfectly enlightened, not being affected or influenced by anybody else's teachings. So because of their perfect enlightenment, a Buddha is well suited, or here they call it Tathagata, is well suited to guide countless beings to enlightenment during their lifetime, and then leave their teachings in such a condition that after their lifetime, more and more beings will attain enlightenment. But during the lifetime of a Buddha, that's the absolute best time to attain enlightenment. So the Buddha is sharing with people during his lifetime that not only have you obtained this human state, but you've obtained it at a time when there's a Buddha in existence. Now is the best time for you to attain enlightenment, because the teachings are shining in the world. The teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, proclaimed by the Buddha, are shining in the world, meaning they're very vibrant, they're very strong, there's lots of wisdom here available for you. And then he says, okay, because of these things, that you've obtained the human state, and there's a Buddha in existence, and these teachings are shining in the world, and they're prevalent and permeating in the world, you should make an effort to understand the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is how to establish right view. And for anybody who learns, reflects, and practices on the Four Noble Truths, you can make the breakthrough to understanding what is the true cause of all discontentedness in the mind. And if you make that breakthrough, then your mind will slant, slope, and incline towards enlightenment, because once you understand deeply and profoundly what is causing discontentedness, you will never again ever blame anyone else for your anger or your frustration, because you know that you're causing it. And therefore, because you know that you're causing it, that empowers you to also eliminate it from the mind. And if you make that breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths, you can unravel and unwind this whole cycle of rebirth through progressing gradually through training and practice, progressing on this path to eliminate discontentedness, which involves eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And when you eliminate craving, desire, attachment, not only are you eliminating discontentedness, but you're eliminating the fuel or the condition that causes rebirth. So you're kind of getting 2 for 1 here. By eliminating craving, desire, attachment, you're not only eliminating discontentedness in the mind, but you're eliminating this whole cycle of rebirth, which is the whole problem that anyone in existence right now is experiencing, is you keep experiencing the misery and displeasure of life because your mind doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It has ignorance. It has unknowing of true reality. And it's not until you gain the wisdom in these teachings that the mind can then progress to eliminate discontentedness and eliminate this problem that you keep experiencing over and over and over and over again, which is birth. And then when you experience birth, you're going to experience sickness, aging, and death. And then you're born again. Sickness, aging, and death. And you're born again. Sickness, aging, and death. And it's just going to keep going on and on and on until you figure this out. And as you do, with the help of teachers, then you can see the truth for yourself, that the condition of the mind and the condition of your life is gradually improving.
Right, it's just a very profound understanding that there's been so many rebirths, and I mean, there's a lot of questions that I have in general, and I'm trying to sort of be clear with what my actual source of my questioning is for related to the cycle of rebirth. But would my awareness of the mind in this life be further developed than a previous human birth that I may have had?
It could be depending on where you were in that previous birth. Um, you know, I don't know what stage of enlightenment, or even if you're in a stage of enlightenment right now, um, but let's just say in a past life you attained the second stage of enlightenment, which is a once returner, meaning you're going to come back one more time. And let's just say this is your life. This is the once that you're coming back, and in a previous life you attained second stage, which is once returner, and this is the life that you're going to attain enlightenment in. But we don't necessarily know that right now, where you might be in the jhanas, or you might even be prior to the jhanas. You might not even be in the jhanas yet. But it could be in your cards in terms of what you're working towards, that you do attain enlightenment in this life. And you could have been a once returner in a previous life, but at this particular point in time, your mind may not be as evolved as it was back then. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't leapfrog that in this life. Or another scenario. Let's say you've never had a human birth before. Let's just say you've always been an animal in all your previous births, and this is your first human life. Well, surely your mind at this point is more developed than any life you ever had in any kind of previous existence. All of our previous existences, for the most part, it really doesn't matter. There's the ability to observe past lives as your mind ascends and as it awakens in this on this path. There are people who do observe previous lives because of these residual memories that are there. And it's interesting if that ever happens to you. It informs a lot in terms of helping you understand kind of things that you've experienced in this life. But in terms of whether you attain enlightenment in this life or not, it isn't dependent upon you remembering your past lives. There's people who I've met that are either extremely close to enlightenment or are enlightened, and they never actually observe their past lives. So while it's a potential that you can observe past lives and know the answer to the question that you're asking about whether your mind is more evolved or not, that is possible. But in terms of how it affects your ability to attain enlightenment in this life, it actually doesn't matter, because some people who attain enlightenment, they don't even remember their past lives at all. So not everybody is going to observe past lives, because that would be permanence, and that doesn't exist. But there are people who do observe past lives. If you observe past lives, it can help you kind of see more of what's gone on in this life and previous lives, and it's interesting. And it also confirms for you with 100% certainty that the cycle of rebirth is true and real. But beyond that, it's not going to do anything more for you to see and observe your past lives or not. Because if you were human in the past and you did evolve your consciousness to a certain stage of enlightenment, those benefits are already on board in the mind right now. So you're benefiting from that previous life anyway. So observing that you had that previous life doesn't really do anything extra for you, other than to really, with 100% certainty, confirm for you that this whole cycle of rebirth thing is real, true, and accurate.
Okay, and is there anything, is there a thing such as a collective consciousness in the world right now? Is there, is the evolution of the mind in the collective of everyone being born, is it actually evolving towards progress towards enlightenment right now? Is there such a thing as collective consciousness?
I'll answer that this way. Each individual has their own individual consciousness, or their own individual mind. That's what a consciousness is the mind. That's our own mind. It's not ours, it doesn't belong to us, but we're experiencing that consciousness in this life. And nobody can take that away from us in terms of the wisdom that's there. You know, people can't take that away from us. So it's our own independent individual consciousness. But the consciousness is influenced by what's around you. And if people want to call that a collective consciousness, then so be it. I'm not sure how different people define a collective consciousness. But based on what you involve yourself in within this life, your consciousness is going to be influenced by that. So if you're around unwholesome things, your consciousness is going to be influenced by that. If you're around wholesome things, it's going to be influenced by that. So I don't call that necessarily a collective consciousness, but if you want to think of it that way, you could. So if you're in a community of people that are all looking to develop their consciousness and gain a higher consciousness, going back to one of your questions about a month or so ago, Manal, about what's the purpose of a sangha or a community. Well, if you've got, 50 or 100 or 5,000 people in a community that are all working towards evolving and developing their consciousness, awakening to enlightenment, this is going to be really beneficial for you. But there is still no kind of collective consciousness. It's just more a matter of everybody kind of influencing each other in a positive way. We're still responsible for our own independent individual consciousness, and that's what truly exists.
Okay, thank you. We have next question from Nick on chapter 5.
Sure.
He asks, the 4 worthy deeds, does number 1 mean giving?
Okay, let's look at this. So chapter 5 is titled The Noble Disciple. So anytime you see noble disciple, this is basically like the Buddha saying like the best students of his, essentially, without saying the best students of mine, because you're not comparing one student to the other, but he's basically saying like a wise disciple and someone who's really well developed in these teachings. So a noble disciple undertakes 4 worthy deeds. And now the Buddha is talking to a householder. A householder is a household practitioner. Householder, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth, righteously gained, the noble disciple undertakes 4 worthy deeds. So he's basically saying someone who's well developed in these teachings, who has earned money or wealth through righteous means, not through backhanded, unwholesome efforts, but through righteous deeds or righteous efforts and striving. Here's the 4 worthy things that this person could do with that wealth that they've acquired. So what are those 4 things that you could do with this righteously developed wealth? Here, householder, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth, righteously gained, the noble disciple makes himself content and pleased, and properly maintains himself in contentedness. Right? So this is that you're going to purchase your needs, not all your wants, but your needs, to maintain your own well-being, your own life. So that's the first priority that the Buddha is saying here, is any money that you earn through your income, be sure you maintain your own contentedness and provide for your own needs. He makes his parents content and pleased and properly maintains them in contentedness. So after you maintain your own well-being and sustain your life, then look to your parents, because those are the next most important people in your life, because they're the ones who gave you life, and that because of that rare human existence that we were just talking about how important a human birth is, our parents are the people who gave us that human birth. So that's why they're the next highest priority in terms of what you can do with your wealth and maintain them in contentedness and ensure they have the necessities to sustain life: food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. He makes his wife and children, we know what those are, slaves, workers, servants. Okay, so during the Buddha's lifetime, they had slaves and servants. Think of these as employees or household workers. Content, pleased, and properly maintains them in contentedness, because these are the people that are helping you to attain your wealth or your income. So without maintaining them in contentedness and paying them properly and ensuring that they get their financial support and their income, their wages, then they're not going to take care of you. So the Buddha here is explaining the natural law of karma of once you have money, how should you allocate it? So this first one, he's saying, take care of yourself, take care of your parents, take care of your workers, people that are contributing to your income. He makes his friends and companions content. These are the people that are close to you, right? So buy your friends lunch, buy them dinner, buy them a gift occasionally to help them along in their life and kind of show generosity to your friends and your companions, because these are people that are supporting you in your life and they're influencing you in positive ways because you guys should be practicing the Dhamma together. So these are the people that the Buddha is saying, okay, this is the first case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been used properly, utilized and used for a wealthy cause. Even though Nick didn't ask, let's just keep going through this, okay? The next one that he talks about is he talks about protecting your wealth from fire, floods, kings, thieves, displeasing heirs, right? So once you've taken care of all these people close to you, including your own well-being, now you've got to protect that wealth. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, they had certain ways to protect that wealth, right? And I guess kings probably used to maybe come in and maybe steal their wealth. Well, for us, this might be like insurance. If you decide you would like to have insurance, or you would like to ensure that you buy a home that is, or investments that are not affected by fire and floods or thieves or displeasing heirs. So maybe that means like having a will and things like that. So you've got to protect this wealth, not holding it real tight, but ensuring that it doesn't get taken away by just something as simple as a fire, a flood, or a thief, or displeasing heirs. Maybe you would like to consider kings, maybe like the government, if the government is coming in and, you know, maybe taking a certain amount of taxes. Like I know when I was in business, I got to the end of the year and it was like, okay, you can write the government a check for this amount, or you can put this in a IRA account for your employees and avoid paying taxes to the government and give it to your employees. So I used to give it to the employees instead rather than putting it into the hands of the government, because I felt like these were people that were helping me and benefiting me, so let me give it to them instead of the government. I still had to pay taxes, but it was just less taxes, right? So maybe you make decisions like that. And the Buddha is saying, okay, by protecting it from fire, floods, kings, thieves, displeasing heirs, so maybe this is a will, insurance, protecting your wealth from thieves, maybe an alarm system if you need an alarm system, or depending on where you live, maybe keeping it in a bank or something like that. That's the second use of wealth. The third one is that you make 5 offerings to relatives, guests, ancestors, the king, and deities. This one I looked at today kind of closely. Relatives, guests, and that makes a lot of sense. We understand that, like making offerings of food and water and clothing, giving gifts to our relatives and our guests. Ancestors, this is a teaching that the Buddha talks about once you get into this book, The Realms of Existence, where he talks about kind of making offerings to people in the past. The king, of course, if you're living in a kingdom as he did during his lifetime, it would only make sense to be good friends and in the good graces of a king. The deities, I'm not exactly sure what he's referring to there, or whether this is even an accurate translation, because this sounds like rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship to me, and I'm not exactly sure what this relates to, and I haven't really seen anything else in his teachings that this could relate to. So for me, I look at this as relatives and guests, but then also the king here, make sure you pay your taxes, right? Because if we don't pay our taxes, we're going to have trouble, and that's going to create unwholesome karma. The fourth one, Nick, is what you were alluding to, or what you were thinking about. This one is about making offerings to the Buddha and teachers and people who have attained one of the four stages of enlightenment in order to continue these teachings. So the Buddha here says, again, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth rightly gained, the noble disciple establishes an uplifting offering of alms, a donation, an offering that is heavenly, resulting in contentedness, conducive to heaven, to those ascetics and Brahmin. These are the people who are sharing teachings with the community about how to attain a better life and enlightenment, who refrain. So it's not just giving it to anybody. It's not just giving it to any ascetic or any Brahmin. He always qualifies it, and he talks about being virtuous, offering it to virtuous people. But here he actually goes into even more detail than just talking about virtuous. He says, who refrain from intoxication and heedlessness, who are settled in patience and mildness, who tame themselves, who tame the mind, calm themselves, and train themselves for nibbana. So anybody who's on this path that has calmed themselves, tamed themselves, who's patient and mild is, who refrains from intoxication and heedlessness, he's saying these people are worthy of offerings. And if you make offerings to these people, it's going to help them to essentially continue on the path. And the further on the path they get, then it's only going to help you, because you're going to be coming in contact with those people, making them offerings, and you're going to be asking them questions to gain wisdom. And their wisdom of ascending on this path is going to help you in your life. So that's going to improve your wisdom and progress on this path. So it's interesting here because and this is the fourth one. What's really interesting here, if you look at it, what I've just shared, and these are the Buddha's words, is we're used to a lot of these traditions of money, giving money to the tradition is the most important. Like just give lots of money to the organization. But what the Buddha's saying here is, hold on, we're last. Take care of yourself, take care of your parents, take care of your children, your wife, all your workers, your friends and companions first. Take care of your wealth in terms of protecting it from fire, floods, thieves, things like this. Then be sure that you take care of your relatives and your guests, right? Then when you're looking for that middle and you've got more money, share it generously with ascetics and Brahmins, teachers who are sharing these teachings in order to help you on this path to enlightenment. So it's really interesting here that he's putting himself essentially as the last priority, because he knows that if you don't take care of all those other things, then how could you ever meet all these other obligations? So you've got to take care of these in a particular order, and he's helping you to see what that order is.
He's asking a follow-up. What is number 3? I think he meant obligations.
Obligations. I think that might be language that you're seeing in your book, Nick, because I know you're using the printed version of this. Here you can see the language that I'm using, which is, I think, perhaps the 5 offerings. Let's see, chapter 5. Let's see what words Nick's seeing. Number 3.
Oblations. I'm sorry. He actually wrote oblations, but I interpret it as obligations. Sorry.
Yeah, so you can see here offerings. I'm using the word offering. 5 offerings.
Okay. We have a question in chapter 9.
All right.
Amina asks a question. Can we discuss the section on wholesome friendship? Curious to know and understand how we can learn from the teachings about relating to friends as we are on the path.
Certainly. So, this teaching here, the Buddha is sharing how to practice in this present life for your welfare and peacefulness, which is essentially to attain enlightenment. And he's talking to some householders here who have asked him a question. And he's basically says these are the four things that lead to welfare and peacefulness of a clansman or a householder in this present life. And he gives four things: accomplishment in initiative, accomplishment in protection, wholesome friendship, and a balanced living. And Amino would like to talk about wholesome friendship. So let's go see what that's about. Wholesome friendship. And what is wholesome friendship? Here, in whatever village or town a clansman lives, he associates with householders or their sons, whether young but of mature virtue. Virtue is like virtuous behavior or practicing virtuous conduct, or old and mature virtue, who are accomplished in confidence, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom. He converses with them and engages in discussions with them. So, this first paragraph, he's talking about people who are accomplished in confidence. When he talks about confidence, he's talking about confidence in him as the Buddha, that he's actually enlightened, confidence in his teachings, and confidence in his community. So, people who are essentially learning and practicing his teachings, they're going to be virtuous in behavior, meaning they're going to have good, wholesome moral conduct, that they're practicing generosity, which is that they're giving and sharing, because if you see people doing that, then that means they're going to not be holding on to things very tightly, and they have wisdom, right? They have wisdom in these teachings and in the Dhamma. And the Buddha is saying, okay, you would be wise to engage in conversations and discussions with these kind of people, whether they're young or mature, old or not. If they have confidence, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom, those are the things to look out for in terms of who you choose as being wholesome friends and wholesome associates to spend your time around. And you converse with them and engage with them, right? Because that's essentially what people were doing 2,500 years ago, right? They weren't going out to play miniature golf and do rock climbing and do all the things that we do in terms of activities, go to the mall. They were essentially sitting around talking with each other, and that's how they learned and they gained things. That's essentially what they had. They had work and they had friendships. That's the things that they had available to them. So then here he goes on, to the extent that they are accomplished in confidence, he emulates them with respect to their accomplishment and confidence. So if you've got friends or associates who are into these teachings and they have a lot of confidence and understanding, and they have a lot of confidence in the Buddha, his teachings, and the community, then the Buddha is saying, okay, you should use them as a role model and emulate them with respect for their accomplishment and confidence, to the extent that they are accomplished in virtuous behavior. So when you see virtuous behavior in your friends, you're like, oh wow, he was so polite, or she was so polite, or wow, look how friendly they are with strangers and children, or look how nicely they are to their neighbors or their children. When you see certain virtuous behavior in other people and you're like, wow, I really like how they did that, you can emulate that, right? You can emulate that behavior and be like, wow, I would like to incorporate some of that into my life practice. And when you're around people who are accomplished in confidence in the Buddha, his teachings, and the community, then they're going to have virtuous behavior. Therefore, you're going to see in this community things that you feel are virtuous and that you can incorporate into your life practice. So you emulate that, use it as a role model, learn from each other. To the extent that they are accomplished in generosity, he emulates that accomplishment in generosity. So when you see people that are giving and sharing with their time, their effort, their energy, and their resources, you're like, wow, they share all the time. That's really admirable, right? then you emulate that, their accomplishment, and you see certain qualities in their generosity, and you emulate that, and you choose to practice those same type of things. And then likewise with wisdom, when you have certain friends that have certain wisdom about the world and about these teachings, then to the extent that you see that they are accomplished in wisdom, then emulate that, use that as a role model. These are wholesome friends, and you can learn from that, and you can grow from that. And that's why we should choose to spend time around people who are practicing these teachings really well. And they may not even know the teachings of the Buddha, but there's people who learn Jesus Christ teachings or Prophet Muhammad's teachings or Hinduism, that they're practicing virtuous behavior, or they're practicing generosity, or they're practicing and have wisdom. You can actually emulate these things through your admiration and observing that these people are practicing good, wholesome teachings. And the Buddha is saying this is called wholesome friendship, that you are learning from the people around you, and you're making wise choices about the people who are around you, so that you do have more and more opportunity of learning from them. Because if we choose unwholesome friends to be around, and they're harsh and rough, or they're talking aggressively, or they're lying or stealing or doing harmful things like this in the world, we're going to be influenced by that too. So by choosing wisely, and then not only do you choose wisely, but the people who are around you, when you see virtuous behaviors and wisdom and generosity, you can say, oh, I like that. I would like to incorporate some of that into my life practice as well.
Nick asked, may you be so kind as to give us modern day examples?
Modern day examples of what?
Friendship, wholesome friendship. This is chapter 9.
Okay.
Not,
So what you do is you look at the Buddha's teachings, and you know what the natural law of Dhamma is, and you understand the 5 precepts: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and substances that cause heedlessness. Now, we've spent a lot more time and a lot more detail in the group learning program and in this book, Developing Life Practice, flushing that out so that you understand the real depth of the 5 precepts. Anybody who you're involved with as a friend, you should ensure that they're practicing the 5 precepts. It doesn't mean that you try to convert your friends to practice them, but you observe and choose people to be around you who are practicing these. So if you meet an acquaintance and you're talking at a coffee shop and you're getting to know somebody, and you're noticing that they're friendly, they're polite, they're kind, and they're talking, and it's like, wow, I'd like to know this person more. Well, if you get 2 or 3 conversations on multiple days, and you start realizing this person's lying to you, not somebody that I would choose to be around. Because if they're willing to lie in these simple examples of just common conversation, then there's no evil that they wouldn't be willing to do based on the Buddhist teachings and based on what we know. So I wouldn't choose to be around somebody that lies. And it doesn't mean I look down on them. It doesn't mean I think they're a bad person. It just means in terms of friends and people who I would like to involve in my life, my son's life, my wife's life, people who I'm willing to go to bat for when there's certain challenges that they're experiencing in their life, and I need to show up in their life and help them with certain things. I'm interested in people who aren't lying. Because if people are lying to me, how can I know whether when they call me up and say, hey, I really need your help, how can I know whether or not that's truthful or not? So you should be interested in having any friends that you select to be in your life to practice the 5 precepts. And it doesn't mean that we try to convince people to practice them. It just means that as we observe that they either are or aren't practicing these precepts, that we choose who to actually spend time with. If you have friends or buddies who are cheating on their partners and going behind the backs of their partners, having sexual misconduct, lying and stealing, that is not going to be helpful in your life, and it's only going to detract from your experiences. So I wouldn't choose to be around those types of people. So for me, that's like a baseline minimum. And I wouldn't involve myself in a personal relationship or a professional relationship with anybody who isn't practicing these five precepts. Because if they're not practicing them, then they're going to make unwholesome decisions. They're making unwholesome decisions in their life. And if I choose to associate with them as friends or professional colleagues, any unwholesome decisions they're making in their life, just by my choice of being associated with them, it's going to affect me too. So if I'm friends with somebody and they're choosing to cheat on their partner, and this eventually gets out, then your partner knows that you're hanging around people that are cheating on their partners. Now this is going to affect you in your relationship with your partner. They're going to have a question in their mind, are you doing those same things because you hang out with this person all the time? Or if you're spending a lot of time with someone who uses drugs and intoxicants, this is going to affect you because let's say they've got drugs and you guys are in a car together traveling. The police pull you over, this person tosses their cocaine into your pocket or onto your seat. Boom. You're busted with drugs even though you've never experienced cocaine, or maybe it's been 10 years since you've experienced cocaine, but you're going to be affected by that. So if you surround yourself by people who aren't practicing these five precepts, then it's kind of like asking for trouble. By being around people who are practicing these five precepts, then you know you're working with good, wholesome people who are making wholesome decisions in their personal life. So therefore, anything that you involve with them, either professionally or personally, you know that it's on the up and up, and it's going to help you continue to progress on this path, and you don't have to be concerned, are they lying to you? Are they going to steal from you? Are they going to cause other problems in your life based on these five precepts? So that's what I would look for in terms of virtuous behavior, is practicing the five precepts. And if you wanted to go further, you could, but most people aren't going to be practicing beyond the five precepts who are off this path. So those are kind of like baseline minimums to look for.
Teacher Deidre, if we can go back to chapter 5.
Sure.
There was some wording that Nick had used, which I want to make sure that it is addressed. So Nick's question was that with the worthy deeds, does number 1 mean giving?
Number 1 is that you're ensuring that you're taking care of these people. So the first one is, of course, yourself, taking care of your basic necessities, your needs. It doesn't mean you give money to your parents necessarily. What the Buddha is talking about here is he makes his parents content. So that means if you observe that your mom doesn't have nutritious food, maybe you go out and buy her food and you help her out. Or you notice that she's aging and she's not able to take care of herself as well, then maybe you invite her to come stay with you, or you help her get the help that she needs to take care of herself. It doesn't necessarily mean that you give people money. It means that you take care to ensure that they have the basic necessities and needs that they need in order to sustain their life.
Does number 2 mean insurance?
The Buddha, during the lifetime of the Buddha, he didn't probably have insurance. I'm not sure when insurance came in. I was using that more as kind of a way to connect it to today, that in order to protect your wealth against losses, perhaps you decide to purchase insurance. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. People have different feelings about insurance, but that would be one way to protect your wealth against fire and floods, thieves. A will would help you to protect against displeasing heirs. But if you're not interested in insurance, there's other ways to protect against fire and flood too, is be sure that you don't purchase investments in places that are prone to fire or prone to floods, right? So during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you think about all these villagers who were in very rudimentary living conditions compared to what we have today, you know, fire and floods can destroy your wealth, especially if you have this in just one place in the house and a flood comes along, it could wipe out your entire wealth. So Perhaps you need to deposit it in a bank. That's could be protecting against fire and floods. So it doesn't necessarily mean 100% insurance, but that is just some ideas along those lines. And there's lots of different ways that you can protect against fire and floods and thieves and displeasing airs. Just giving lots of different examples here.
Does number 3 mean faith offerings?
Number 3, as I mentioned, the one about ancestors and deities, this one, it relates, at least the ancestors one, relates to a teaching that you're going to see later. The one about deities, I think this might be a translation that is not quite 100% accurate. Because I don't know Pali, I don't know what the original source word were. But the Buddha wouldn't teach rites, rituals, and ceremonies or worship in order to make offerings to any deities. So this looks strange and odd to me. The king one, I would think about this as paying your taxes, because if you don't pay your taxes, that's going to affect your Dhamma, right? You need to make sure that you're meeting the obligations of whatever government you're living within. And the other two here are relatives and guests that, ensure that you're being generous and making offerings of food and things like this to any relatives or guests, because you need to ensure that you're extending your generosity and you're not just selfishly holding on to your wealth, but you're sharing it with other people around you. But it doesn't mean you hand someone a $20 bill. It means that, okay, maybe you make some food and you've got more than you need, so you offer it to your relatives or some neighbors, right? You can think about that as guests, is that, you knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, we made some food, we had some extra, and I'd like to offer this to you. This is something that used to happen in America quite a bit back in the 50s and 60s that we've gotten away from. So that would improve your Dhamma by making generous offerings like this. Or say that you were involved in something and you got a big old watermelon and you cut up the watermelon and you've got all this extra watermelon left over. It's like, hey, why not offer it to my relatives or my neighbors? Or say you go to the market and you are going to purchase one watermelon, but it's buy one get one free, or it's buy two get one free, or you were planning to buy one, but if you buy 3, it's like just a little bit extra money. Well, that's a way that you can buy the one for yourself and give away the extra 2 to neighbors or relatives as an offering and as a gift, and practicing generosity. So it doesn't have to be that you give money. It can be that you take extra time, effort, and energy to share resources. And those resources can be food or shelter or clothing, water, all different kinds of things that we have available to us.
And does 4 mean donations to ascetics?
Yeah, so here, this is people who are sharing the teachings and offering alms. Alms is a word that essentially means a donation, but when we think donation, or at least maybe when you think donation, you might think money, right? And that's typically what we think about, because it's kind of easier to give money nowadays, and the person can go out and buy clothes or food or shoes or whatever else they need to buy. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they actually didn't handle money. The Buddha wouldn't accept money as a offering. He would accept food, he would accept water, of course, he would accept clothing, he would accept shelter, and he would accept medical care. He actually wrote into he taught, and then they eventually wrote down that ordained practitioners weren't able to handle gold or silver, or they weren't able to accept like land and animals and different things like this. They were only able to accept alms, or these basic necessities of life. So I put in the parentheses donation, but don't think of this as purely money. Although most of our donations or alms that we offer nowadays, like you guys are so far away from me that there's been a few students who've bought me books and sent me books, but for the most part, people will send a donation of money because they know David's living a very basic lifestyle And if he needs to go buy some sticky rice, he will buy sticky rice. And if he needs to buy a shirt, he will go buy a $5 shirt. If he needs to pay for Zoom in order to host these classes, he will pay for Zoom to host these classes. If he needs to print some books and give them away to some people who don't have access to these books, then he'll do that with it. And there's a certain level of trust that you have in giving a monetary donation, that the person you're giving it to is practicing virtuous behavior, and they will allocate that money in a good, wholesome way to benefit their basic necessities of life and perhaps other people as well. But the donations that you give to a teacher don't necessarily have to be just money. They can be other things as well.
There are no more questions on Zoom, so we'll go to Bassem next.
Okay.
Thanks, Manal. We have a question on YouTube from David P. He says, how can I ease my doubt in rebirth?
Okay, so the doubt that we have about rebirth is that the vast majority of the world has been taught that we only get one life. And that's what people have been taught. But ask yourself, what evidence do we have that we only have one life? What evidence have you seen to prove to you with 100% certainty that you only get one life? Even though that's what's been taught and that's what the vast majority of the world probably believes, it's a belief. And it hasn't been proven by anybody. There's no indisputable evidence that we only get one life. So that's the competing teaching here, is that we only get one life. There's no evidence that I've seen that supports that, other than the fact that at this point in your life, you can't remember any other previous lives, right? However, as you learn and progress on this path and the mind awakens, you might actually observe past lives, which will convince you beyond a shadow of doubt that the cycle of rebirth is true. That's one aspect, or two aspects. You can actually look online, and there's a lot of people who discuss rebirth, and there's a lot of recent documentation. If you haven't experienced seeing your previous lives yourself, there's lots of other people that have experienced the cycle of rebirth, and they have seen their past lives. So you can research that and read about this one particular case that I will share with you. Is there's a 4-year-old boy. He's not 4-year-old anymore, but at the age of 4 in Australia, he was having memories of a previous life as being Princess Diana, the princess of England. And he remembered meetings, private meetings that she was in, which is 2 or 3 people. And these weren't public meetings. And he was remembering these with such vivid detail that he could explain the people that were in the meeting, he could explain the clothing that they were wearing, and his own clothing as Princess Diana. And he lives in Australia as a 4-year-old boy. And you can see this online, and if you need access to this, let me know, because I saved it. I can send it to you, and you can read about it. So that can help you to kind of read other people's stories, and there's countless stories out there about people that have observed things like this, and there's just no way that this boy could know this. And what this investigative reporters did is they went back to people in England like Prince Charles and others that are familiar with the meetings that Princess Diana was in, to confirm that this little boy's stories were 100% true. And they confirmed that yes, she had those meetings, they were private meetings, it wasn't public, yes, that's what those people wore, we have it written in our royal documentation. So you can see these kind of things for yourself. Then the other thing that you can do is just continue to learn, continue to practice, continue to awaken the mind, and kind of set the whole cycle of rebirth to the side. Because truly, this whole cycle of rebirth doesn't really matter to your progression to enlightenment. What happened in the past, in your previous lives, it doesn't really matter. The fact is that right now, you're a human being, you have a discontent mind, and you need to attain enlightenment. What may or may not happen in the future in the cycle of rebirth, it really doesn't matter. It's not important right now, unless you wanted to use it as motivation to attain enlightenment, to get out of this cycle of rebirth. What's really important is right now, in this human life, your mind is discontent, and the more that you learn and practice these teachings, the core path of the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the five precepts, really deep, extensive meditation practice, this is going to train the mind, and you'll see the truth for yourself that the mind becomes more and more peaceful, getting to this enlightened mental state. What happened in the past or may happen in the future is irrelevant, because you can actually train in the core path, experience the results of an enlightened mind, and then, okay, there's the cycle of rebirth. I've escaped it, because you know that you've eliminated discontentedness 100%. And whether you actually know that the cycle of rebirth existed or didn't, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't believe in the cycle of rebirth, and you don't need to believe in it. All you need to do is learn and practice the core teachings, train the mind in those, independently see for yourself that the condition of the mind is improving. And when you do that, it doesn't really matter about the cycle of rebirth, because you're solving the problem of discontentedness, and you're also solving the problem of the cycle of rebirth as well. So that's the most important part of what I needed to say there. But then also, you can also talk to Christians, you can talk to people who are in the medical field. I've talked to people who are Christians in the medical field, and they will tell you that they actually know that the cycle of rebirth is real, because there's been people who have been so involved in the birth and death process that they've observed things that they know that the cycle of rebirth is true. I've seen a recent survey that 25% of all Christians believe that you actually do get more than one life. So the Christian faith is one that tends to teach nowadays that you only get one life. But Jesus Christ told everybody that he will come again. He said, I will come again. That's rebirth. Jesus Christ actually said he will be reborn again. This is rebirth. And there's documentation that you can see that the Christian church, the Catholic Church, actually taught rebirth as part of Christian teachings up until 543 AD. 543 AD, the Catholic Pope was threatened to go to jail by a king, that if he didn't take the cycle of rebirth out of the Christian teachings, the king was going to put him in jail. So the Pope at that time said, okay, put me in jail then. And for 2 years he was in jail. But after 2 years he was eventually convinced, and he took the teachings of rebirth out of the Christian teachings. And that's what's being shared in the world today, is that we only get one life. But that's impermanence, that's change. Jesus Christ himself taught he will come again, and that's rebirth. And there's documentation that shows that that was part of the Christian teachings up until 543 AD. And it wasn't until the Pope, which essentially that was the only church that was going on at that time, that was the Christian faith, is Catholicism. So once they took it out of their teachings, then everyone else kind of after that, which now we're 1500 years beyond that, have just taught that there's just one life. But that's actually not true. And based on Jesus' own words, that's not what Jesus taught. Jesus taught he will come again. So we don't have evidence that there's just one life. We don't have any evidence of that supports that. We have a bunch of belief that people say that. The evidence actually supports the cycle of rebirth. And the more that you encounter this and understand it, the more you'll see the truth for yourself. But as I mentioned, the real important part is to stay on that core path, the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the five precepts, extensive meditation training, evolve and improve the condition of the mind, and just kind of set the whole cycle of rebirth thing to the side, until you get further on the path and you see improvement to the condition of the mind. And as that happens, you may actually end up observing your past lives, and the whole cycle of rebirth question gets answered just by the fact that you stayed on the core path and training the mind to awaken.
Okay, next question is from chapter 8.
Okay, let's go to chapter 8.
Yes, here in the first paragraph and in the first line, a householder, the one enjoying sensual pleasures. And at the last line of this paragraph, he may be praised. So the Buddha is praising someone who is enjoying sensual pleasures.
He's basically saying householders who are enjoying sensual pleasures, here are the four things that that person can be praised on. So he's going to be giving you four grounds or four things. The Buddhist teachings are all about eliminating craving, desire, attachment, hatred, anger, ill will, ignorance, delusion, unknowing of true reality. So he's not praising the sensual pleasures. He's just categorizing and classifying, providing some adjectives of what a householder is. So he's saying householder, the one who's enjoying sensual pleasures, who seeks wealth righteously. So he's basically classifying a householder as being different than an ascetic or an ordained practitioner, that the householders tend to be enjoying sensual pleasures. Now that he's classified what a householder is, now he's going to go into explaining the four grounds to be praised on. So here's the four grounds that he's saying are praiseworthy in terms of a householder. One who seeks wealth righteously without violence. So basically, without killing, without intimidating, without harming. This is a righteous conduct. This is virtuous conduct, and he should be praised for acquiring wealth without causing violence, right? So that's the first thing that he's praising. He's not praising the sensual desires. He's praising the fact that he's earning wealth without violence. Then the second one is that he can be praised because he makes himself joyful and pleased. So essentially, he's working towards contentedness and peacefulness. He's not being disgruntled. He's not complaining. He's not arrogant or egotistical. He's not looking down on people, judgmental. He's being joyful. He's being pleasant. He's not degrading people, right? He's not derogatory. He's being joyful and pleased, right? That's the second thing to praise this person about. The third thing is that he shares his wealth and does meritorious deeds. So he's generous. He's giving and sharing. Those other teachings that we shared and explored with Nick about how to use your wealth, that's what he's praising here. He's praising that wealth was being used righteously. Those teachings that we went through with Nick and Manal. Then the fourth ground to be praised is that he uses wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it, blindly absorbed in it, seeing danger in it. Okay? So by holding on to the wealth so tightly and being obsessed with it, he uses the money without that he understands this middle way, that he's not holding on to it so tightly, that he understands the danger in holding on to it too tightly, that he gives and shares, and he's generous, as well as meeting his own needs, like we talked about with Manal and Nick. And then the last part, he says, and understands the escape, right? So if a householder sees the danger in holding on to money and wealth so tightly, and how that's going to hinder him from attaining enlightenment because of the craving, desire, attachment, that's the danger, seeing the danger in obsessing over wealth. Then the person would understand the escape. The escape is coming to the middle way and letting go and practicing generosity so that the mind isn't holding on to this wealth so tightly. The escape is the Eightfold Path. learning and practicing the Eightfold Path, that's the exit door. That's the escape out of the cycle of rebirth. So by training the mind on the Eightfold Path, you're escaping from this discontentedness because you see the danger in allowing the mind to reside in discontentedness through this obsession with money. And these are the four things that the Buddha says, these are praiseworthy, that I can praise somebody and see these as admirable for somebody who's a householder and practicing these four things.
Okay, chapter 19. Actually, it's a short one, so if you kindly provide some more clarification about this chapter.
Yeah, sure. This is a good one. So, chapter 19, to understand even a single sentence. Headman, which is a community leader. Because if they understand even a single sentence, that will lead to their welfare and peacefulness for a long time. Here, what the Buddha is talking about is his teachings. This is actually one sentence at the end of a longer Dhamma teaching, where he's saying that his teachings, that he shares them openly with a lot of people, and if those people just understand one sentence of his teachings, then that will lead to their welfare and peacefulness for a very long time. Because his teachings are deep, deep in meaning. He talks about this, how deep and how profound and wisdom without arrogance, but he's just talking about the depth of the teachings of how they produce this enlightened mind. And if somebody understands even just a single sentence of his teachings, then it helps to lead to their welfare and peacefulness for a very long time. So
Okay,
let me give you an example of this, Bassam. Understanding that the Buddha taught loving kindness and compassion for all beings, right? If somebody was into a lot of unwholesome things in their life, and all they understood was that the Buddha taught to have loving kindness and compassion for all beings, and they understood what that meant, and all they did was practice loving kindness and being compassionate for all beings in their life, that would lead to welfare and peacefulness for a long time, if they just understood that one sentence. Oops, I think Bassam's internet froze up, Manal.
Yeah.
There he comes. He's coming back.
Okay. Today, so thanks.
You're breaking up there, Bassam. I think you're at the end of all your questions, right? No more questions?
I'm not sure about Basa. There are no more questions on the Zoom.
Okay. So it looks like we're all...
Sorry, teacher, maybe there is...
Yeah, it looks like you're getting some impermanence there. Oh, he dropped out. Okay. We got some impermanence on the internet connection of Bassam. Here in Chiang Mai, it rained before class today, so we didn't get any electric outage. We got a couple flickers, but we didn't lose our electric and Wi-Fi like we have been in the past. So I take it that there's no more questions anywhere in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, Manal or Bassam?
It looks like Bassam is reconnected. Can you hear us, Bassam?
Yes. Actually, there is no more questions now for Facebook or YouTube.
Okay, so it sounds like we're covered all the questions. This was a very interesting class. A lot of interesting teachings here, so enjoy reading this book. For next week, it's going to be chapters 26 through 56. So there's 30 chapters. Remember the way that I suggest that you read these, because it would probably take you about an hour to read those, right? Maybe 45 minutes. Is read them only about 10 minutes a day, right? Because if you sit down and you read the 45 minutes or an hour, if that's all you can do and you've only got that one block of time and that's what you do, go ahead, go for it and do that. But if you can work it into your life, where just 10 minutes a day, or maybe 15 minutes a day, you just read 2 or 3 or 4 chapters from the book, and you just sit with those for a 24-hour period before you bring in another 3 or 4 chapters, that's the absolute best way to learn the Buddhist teachings, because his teachings are so profound and so meaty, and there's so much meaning in each individual word, that if you try to learn 30 chapters at one sitting and then you walk away and all of that is ruminating in the mind, you're going to have less ability to think through and reflect on that, and less ability to actually apply it in your daily life. So if you kind of work into your schedule, whether it's in the morning or night when you're meditating, maybe before your meditation or after your meditation, you just read for about 10 or 15 minutes, maybe like 3, 4, 5 chapters of the book. That would be outstanding. And, if you read for 30 minutes and then you read another 30 minutes and then you repeated it multiple times, okay, do it that way. You don't have to do it the way that I'm explaining, but I suggest for you to drip it into your mind rather than kind of like all a big massive lump. So if you read for 10 or 15 minutes each day, okay, great. But if you have extra time and you want to read more, read 30 minutes, read 10 chapters if you'd like, and then tomorrow read 10 chapters. And now you've got all the chapters done for the week. Well, you've got 3 or 4 or 5 more days left. Read those same chapters again and again. By going over them multiple times, it will really help you. But the best way that I found is just 10 or 15 minutes a day right before bedtime. There's research that shows if you read before bedtime, it actually retains in the mind a lot longer than if you read like in the morning or in the middle of the day. And this makes a lot of sense, because if you read in the morning, for example, and then you had 14 hours worth of your day, there's a lot of busyness that you're doing in your day. You're not going to really retain what you learned in the morning or in the middle of the day, because you've got all these other busy activities that you're involved in. So if you do like what I did, which is I mostly read at nighttime, is read the teachings for 10 or 15 minutes either before or after your meditation, and then go to sleep. And then what you'll notice when you wake up, your mind will actually still have retained those teachings, and now you've retained them for a longer period of time, and all during that day you can be applying the teachings throughout your day. And then that evening, when you get home, before or after your meditation, read 3, 4, 5 more chapters. And you'll notice that this just becomes a habit where you're doing this each day, and the teachings will be retained in the mind so much better this way, because you can't really practice the teachings in daily life if you haven't retained the teachings. You need to learn them and absorb them, retain them, so then when you're in that conversation, or you're in that business meeting, or you're looking at something on the internet, or you're doing something, that you remember the teachings so you can apply it, right? You can't tell your friend, hold on a second, we're about to have a conversation. Let me check the 5 factors of well-spoken speech before we have this conversation, because I really would like to have this good conversation with you. Oh, okay, now let's have our conversation. You can't do that, right? So if you can retain these teachings in the mind through learning them at night for 10 or 15 minutes, and then retain them over your sleep, which the mind will be able to do more readily, and then when you wake up in the morning, you meditate again, of course, and you go out into your day having retained the teachings that you learned in the evening. This will be really, really helpful for you, because now we're diving into a much thicker book with a lot more teachings, and it would be really helpful for you to kind of develop this process of studying each evening and then meditating in the morning and going out into your day and applying the teachings so that you can see their truth. Don't just believe what you're reading, but apply it in daily life so that you can see the truth for yourself, that as the Buddha's wisdom is being shared with you, you apply this and you actually see that it's working for you to improve your life. So tomorrow in our group learning program, we're in chapter 9, which is in the book Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Nibbana, which is all about the natural law of Dhamma. So if you'd like to join for that, either here in Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube, it'll be live same time starting at 9 o'clock Thai time, whatever time that is for you. We're going to be discussing the natural law of karma. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation. So if you'd like to join at the same time, same venue for loving kindness meditation, we're going to be doing that together on Wednesday. And I'll be teaching it first, and then we'll be doing it together as a group. And then next Saturday, we'll be in chapters 26 through 56 of this same book, Buddha Vajana Dhamma Primer. So until I see you at one of those times, or maybe in a personal guidance discussion that you might choose to have a really lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.